Apologize for the late start. I call to order the meeting of the East Point Planning Commission for Thursday, August 4th at 7:06 p.m. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Broll?
Present.
Mr. Lalonde?
Present.
Ms. Munez?
Present.
Mr. DeHaan?
Present.
Ms. Naylor?
Present.
Ms. Julinski, here. Chairman Palazzolo?
Here. I'd like to start by welcoming our newest member of the commission, Stacy Munoz. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us. Welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the community, please feel free to do so.
My name is Stacy Munoz, and I am excited to be here with the Planning Commission. I also serve on the Board of Ethics as chair of the board, so thank you so much for having me.
We're very thankful that you're here. Is Commissioner prepared to make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair DeHaan and a second by Commissioner Lalonde. Are there any comments, questions, or proposed changes to the agenda? Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHaan?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Ms. Munez?
Yes.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Chairman Palazzolo?
Yes. We move on to the approval of minutes. Is the commissioner prepared to make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting dated July 7th, 2022?
Yeah, I have a question. I noticed on 7 votes that we took, we never registered yea or nay, the maker of the motion and the second person who made the second motion. Is that something new? I always remember all the members would be listed.
The maker of the motion and the supporter of the motion would be recognized in the minutes? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's the way I always thought we did it.
I thought I did see,
These people,
Oh, in the yays, they were.
in the yeas and nays.
Just in the motion.
oh, I understand.
They only list 4 or 5 instead of the 6 or 7.
That is interesting, yeah. There are a couple. I didn't pick up on the fact that the yays don't identify the maker of the motion and the supporter of the motion. Although I'm not sure that that's typical practice, as the text does identify the maker of the motion and the supporter of the motion. However, you are correct. There are seemingly people missing, unless it's assumed based on the text that the yays are also the maker and the supporter, although I would question whether or not that's universally true. Mr. Albright, do you have a thought on this matter?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was discussing some other issue. What was the question?
So the minutes of the meeting of July 7th, and it may have been true prior, but to be honest with you, I don't recall off the top of my head, they identify in the text the maker of the motion and the supporter of the motion. However, when it gets to the roll call, the maker and the supporter are not listed.
Either way would be fine.
No concern with that?
No concern with that.
Okay. Now, if the maker of the motion or the supporter of the motion voted in the opposite direction, I would hope that
That should be reflected.
they should be reflected, correct?
That should be reflected in the minutes.
Okay. Okay. So,
But either way is fine with me.
okay.
But
So would the planner please note that in the future, if there are makers of the motion or supporters of the motion who vote in contradiction to the motion that they made or supported, that those are reflected at the very least, if not listed with the yeas. We have a motion by Vice Chair DeHaan to approve the minutes of the meeting dated July 7th. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Broll. Does any commissioner have any other comments, questions, concerns? Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHaan?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
yes,
Ms. Julinski, yes. Ms. Munez?
Yes.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Chairman Palazzolo?
Yes. We have no public hearings for the evening, so we move on to new business. Item A, will the planner please review the memorandum of July 28, 2022?
Yes, hi, Chair. But before that, did we do the first hearing of the public?
Yes,
Probably not.
we didn't do it.
No, I don't think we did.
No.
Nope. Thank you for that. Going backwards in the agenda, because apparently I have no idea what I'm doing. Going back to agenda item 3 for the first hearing of the public. If anyone would like to comment on any topic, please request to be heard and wait to be called. When you are called, please approach the podium, state your name, write your name on the ledger, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we can move back to where apparently I tried to jump to in the first place. New business, item A.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm Mara Bratuszewski. Nice to meet you, Stacy. Looking forward to working with you. So today, the Planning Commission is looking to review the site plan for 22345 Kelly. We previously reviewed the special land use request, and the special land use request was approved by City Council a couple weeks ago. And we, the planners, have made a recommendation. Pending any comments from the public, we recommend the Planning Commission consider the following motion for the site plan. So we recommend approval for the site plan for the event hall at 22345 Kelly with a waiver not to install the required 6-foot masonry screening wall along the western side of the property. The applicant received notice from, or was able to connect with the resident to the west side of the property, and the resident does not want a screening wall. They want to maintain their shrubs and bushes. So the applicant is requesting a waiver and has the permission of the abutting resident. And then also the applicant's requesting a waiver to share the existing unscreened dumpster at the adjacent commercial property. However, we just received notice that the applicant's looking to use trash cans as opposed to dumpsters, and the trash cans will be located inside of their facility. That's it.
Do commissioners have any questions for the planner? See, the applicant is present. Is there anything that the applicant would like to say? Please approach the podium, state your name, and record your name on the ledger, please. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't know if the mic is on.
Okay. I just wanted to let you know that we did apply with everything that was recommended of us to do to make everything safe and for the community. And I'd like to thank you all for helping us because, like I said, this is something new to us. We do have a business in East Point, the boutique, but this is something different. So now that we know the rules and regulations, we know how we got to go about everything before we even try to do anything like this again. But I appreciate you all especially for Myra, for helping us along, and Kim for being there, and Dennis, to help us to do the right thing and make sure everything is correct and by the book. So now we know that everybody's going back to the old way and refreshing everything. Now we know. So I just want to thank you all for being patient with us and having us here in East Point. Thank you.
Do any commissioners have any questions for the, ma'am, if you wouldn't mind just staying there at the podium for a second, just in case commissioners have any questions. Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. So, I understand that you have something, you have written documentation from your neighbor about not.
No, I talked to her sister. She was at work, and when I did catch her, she was on her way out to work, and because I talked to her sister, and she was talking about her, because she has a lot of flowers and flower beds and stuff. She's real particular about her flowers, and she wanted them watered there all day. And I talked to her when she was on her way to work, and I talked to her about the wall, and she said no, that'll block her view. And like I showed y'all in the pictures last month, it's like for her driveway and by her garage, so there's no way in and out like that. It'll just block everything.
Well, I mean, she but I understand.
Right.
It does.
She just like her shrubbery and like her yard with her plants and stuff, and she says she don't want anything blocking her view from Kelly.
Okay, so I guess what I would say is, the masonry walls are required, and so you're asking for a waiver. So what I would ask back, if it gets to that point, is
Yes.
that we get something in writing.
That's not a problem. I know she would do it, but she says she has no problem with doing it. But at that time, she was on her way to work.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to stop her from, being late at work.
Sure, I understand. I put a lot of weight into what the neighbors say
Right.
about it.
Right,
Absent the neighbors, normally I wouldn't, it's an alleyway. We require it of everybody else as an expenditure that other applicants do, but if the neighbor jumps in and says something, so if the neighbor's not here today, that's fine.
right.
But I would like to see, if we get to that point, that there's something in writing
Yes,
to that effect that your neighbor signs.
I have no problem. We'll
And then
get you something
can
right.
submit that administratively.
But will it just stop us from doing it again? I have no problem with it.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other
Excuse me.
questions? Commissioners have questions? Yes.
I just had a question for clarification with respect to the dumpster. Initially, it said that there was an unscreened dumpster adjacent to the business that you would be using, but then there was some mention of garbage cans in place of a dumpster?
Yes. The dumpster that they're referring to is for my boutique that's next door. This came after the fact about the screenery, but I'd already had the dumpster next door. So what I was going to do was share the dumpster, but it didn't make no sense to share the dumpster because I really don't throw anything out. If someone is being catered, they come in and they take their stuff out. So I didn't really need a dumpster. So what I got was a small garbage can, just in case, to make sure everything was okay.
Okay. So anything that's catered, everything that's brought in? would be
They take
removed
it.
from
They
the
have to
property?
take it back out. They have to take it back out. And excuse me, with the garbage, with the wall, when I was here last time, y'all told me to get a verbal. Y'all didn't say y'all needed it in writing, so I didn't know, but I would have brought it in writing. You know what I'm saying? So I just brought it verbally because I talked to her and her sister.
Okay, if we said that, apologize for being unclear.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I have another question, but I want to double back to the professionals for a minute.
Sure.
So in reviewing the site plan, I noticed there's no discussion in your recommendation about parking, and I know there's a shared parking. Can we just double back to that and maybe get a little feedback, if they're in compliance with the parking numbers and that type of thing? Can you just double back to that conversation, please?
Yeah, previously during the special land use discussion, the applicant turned in shared parking agreements, and the city attorney reviewed them and found that they were acceptable, and the applicant has sufficient amount of parking.
There's sufficient parking, okay. And then I would double back to the applicant, and I know the last time you were here, you had said there were 3 parking agreements that were signed. And the discussion was, well, like one of them was a couple of the units down, and then there was a block where there weren't. So I doubled back and said, can you get agreements, can you pursue agreements with the rest of the people that are in that parking area, right? Because everybody in there is gonna feel the impact if you have 50 cars parked in that parking lot, right?
Right.
Did
The reason, well, I didn't go back on that. I was focused on the main things that were stopping and that I needed to get done because I'd already had the parking agreement, so I figured that was okay. But I understand what you're saying. But like I said, anything that I have there, that is instructed in our contract, is instructed verbally that this is where you park. If it's a business going on, doing business at that business time, they have to park in the lots that we have the agreements with. And all the clients that we do have that come there, like for a repass or whatever the case may be, they have been doing that.
But I mean, for instance, let's take what you just said and put it in practicality, right? So you're doing an event, and there's 5 parking spots. I know, if I remember correctly, and I didn't go back and touch up myself, so you've got your own parking, you've got the company that you own right next to it. And I think you have an agreement with right next to it, but then there's a block that's 1 or 2 of the businesses where you don't have an agreement, and then there's one downstream that you have an agreement.
No.
I mean, people aren't gonna know, is that wrong?
Yes. It's one, we're on the corner. We have the business next door, so that's
Right.
2 businesses. Then we have the cleaners that's right across the street. It's a right across the street.
Right.
And then other people do have businesses there, but it's like right in the next block that they have like 20 parking spaces.
Yeah. I mean,
It's just like with the businesses that are there now. I will be wrong if I tell their customers they can't park here in front of my store when they're going to the Chinese food place or they're going to get their hair did. I have no problem with it. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that, it's city property. I can't tell anyone to really actually where to park at. But
I do, I understand. It's a shared parking agreement. I'm just trying to make the best outcome. You've met your compliance, so you're fine there. I'm just
Okay.
trying to make the best outcome.
I understand what you're saying. I understand exactly what you're saying. But I don't want to stop them from getting their customers parked there. That's why I did what I did that way. Make it better for everybody. Because whoever comes to my hall, they're going to see, oh, this is a Chinese food place here. It's a nail salon here. It's a boutique here, another boutique. And it's basically for the community. Because some people come down there and come to the hall, never even been that way. Never knew those places was even there. So it helps everyone.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you anticipate events happening during the business day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5?
No, if it's a business, if it's some event that's going on in the daytime, it's usually like a repast, something that's probably going to be held like from 3 to 7, 3 to 8. It's not to stop anyone's business. And like I said, if it's during that time that the businesses are open, because sometimes they close. Some of them are closed Monday, some closed Tuesday, some closed Sunday. If it's that time, I instruct them to park where I'm able to park. That's it.
Thank you.
One other question. 'Cause
Yes.
You've done great answering all of our questions. And I'm not sure how much you've had to answer before today, but that information is in your contracts with those who come to,
I do it verbally, but it's not a problem for me to put it in my contract.
okay. And the same with respect to them removing whatever they bring in.
Oh, of course.
That's
Yeah.
And just in doubling back to one minor part of parking,
Okay.
if I recall correctly, you said there were spots in the back, right?
Yeah, I
Are
have,
people going to be parking back there that are customers, or is that more for the business owner?
that's more for me if I'm there or I'm coming to check on the hall or someone that's working in a boutique, they park in the back. It's like 6 parking spaces back there in the back.
It's not your intent to have customers parking back there?
No, no.
Yep. Thank you.
Anything else? Y'all got me nervous up here.
Do other commissioners have any other questions? Is the commissioner prepared to make a motion to recommend, to approve the site plan for the event hall at 22345 Kelly Road, parcel ID 02-14-32-229-024, with the waiver to install the required 6-foot masonry screen wall along the rear of the property, subject to administrative review and approval of a written letter of support from the adjacent property owner, and a waiver to share the existing unscreened dumpster of the adjacent business in the commercial plaza.
waiver to not install, right?
Waiver to not install, correct.
I'm prepared to file a motion for moving forward with the waivers as recommended with the professionals.
Okay, so that's different than what I just said.
Okay, you said a lot, Sonny.
Yeah.
Let's try it again.
So
Where are you reading from? I can see it.
I'm not reading from anything. I'm making it up as I
I would say
go.
it was a long sentence.
Yeah,
I tried to.
I'm taking what is provided, but I'm modifying a little bit. Technically, the only modification I'm making is under waiver A, that the waiver is approved, subject to administrative review and approval of a letter of support from the adjacent property owner.
So you're saying we need to get the letter of, is subject to getting that?
Yes.
So can we file a motion if it's subject to something? Just curious.
Yes.
We don't have that. Okay, so on to me. I'm going to try this again. I move that we file the motion, and I move to recommend approval of the site plan for the event hall at 22345 Kelly Road, parcel ID number 02-14-32-22-229-024 with the following waivers: a waiver not to install the required 6-foot masonry screening wall along the rear of the property, a waiver to share the existing screen, well, that's taken away. Subject to the approval from written documentation of the neighbor. Did I get it that time?
And also the second waiver.
I thought we were saying it wasn't going to be shared. Waiver to share the existing on-screen dumpster of an adjacent business to the commercial plaza. I thought she was going to use the trash cans, so that's why I didn't read the second one.
Right, so it's just a waiver.
Okay, waiver
Yeah.
to share the existing.
Yeah.
Subject with the neighbor's approval.
Do we have support?
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Naylor and support from Vice Chair DeHunt. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns?
Make the front of the building look prettier, please.
Secretary, please call the roll.
You'll get my yes. I'm asking you just to find a way to make it look prettier. That's all I'm saying.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Ms. Muniz?
Yes.
I say yes too.
Oh, Chairman Palazzolo. I'm still writing my notes.
That's fine.
That's what you get for being late. I
That's
forgot you
right.
were here.
I deserve every bit of that. We move on to unfinished business. Item A, will the planner please review the memorandum of July 27, 2022?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. The proposed text amendments to state licensed residential facilities and similar uses has been updated based on the conversation in July. So adult foster care small group and adult foster care large group are no longer special land uses, but permitted uses in the RT and both the multifamily zoning districts. The definition for a halfway house has also been revised in the proposed changes to include facilities for substance abuse treatment and the like. So not just for those being released as part of an inmate program. So if the commission is prepared to make a recommendation to City Council, the sample motion is provided on the front page of our memorandum. Thank you.
Do any commissioners have any questions?
I do. When we define family child care home and group child care home, there's a maximum number. Yet in the definition of child care center, there's no maximum. Should there be a max?
For a commercial child care center, no, that would be regulated by the state.
All right.
So, Commissioner Lalonde, where were you reading?
I'm sorry.
Where were you reading?
Under the definition of child care center.
Oh, okay, John. Okay. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments? I do have one request, because typically when we go through ordinance changes, we see, before we make a motion, we see a final red line version, complete text, and that's not what we have here. So I would just ask that we get a copy when this goes to City Council, if that's possible.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Is the commissioner prepared to recommend approval of the proposed text amendments to the following sections of the East Point zoning ordinance? 50-10 definitions, 50-70 R1 one-family residential district, 50-80 RT townhome residential district, 50-81 RM1 multiple family residential district, 50-90 OS1 office service district, 50-91 B1 community business district, and 50-93 B3 general business district, as related to state licenses, residential facilities, and similar uses to bring the current ordinance into compliance with the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act and other state and federal regulations as presented in the commission's packet.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have support?
I'll support it.
We have a motion by Vice Chair DeHunt and support from Commissioner Lalonde. Does anyone have any final comments, questions, or concerns? Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman Palazzolo?
Yes. Item B. Will the planner please review the memorandum of July 27th, 2022?
Yes, thank you. So these are some proposed changes to the future land use map of the 2040 master plan that the commission has discussed. There is one error on our part for Spindler Park. We had talked about that at the last meeting, that needs to be represented as civic space instead of residential, so we will make that adjustment. But if the map is acceptable to the Planning Commission, then the next step would be to recommend to City Council to authorize the 42-day distribution period. So since this is an amendment to the master plan, the distribution and comment period is required, so it would be sent to the surrounding jurisdictions and available on the website and at City Hall. After that, the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing to consider adoption, and then City Council would also adopt. So this would be sending it out for public comment at this point, and is not a final adoption and could be contingent on us addressing Spindler Park in the final version.
Do any commissioners have any questions? Is the commissioner prepared to make a recommendation to City Council to authorize the 42 days distribution and comment period for the future land use amendments to the master plan with the addition and inclusion of the future land use for Spindler Park?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have support?
Support.
We have motion by Vice Chair DeHunt and support from Commissioner Naylor. Any final comments, questions, or concerns? Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Ms. Munoz,
Yes.
and Chairman Palazzolo?
Yes. Item C, will the planner please review progress memo 3, 4, where are we at?
Yeah,
Whatever the progress memo is.
yeah, the update on the zoning ordinance,
Yep.
sure. So within your packet today, you received the steering committee's packet along with the worksheets that are optional for you to enjoy and offer feedback. Just some housekeeping. We will be sending you, as the Planning Commission, the steering committee's packet when we do send the steering committee the worksheets in the packet. So feel free to participate in the worksheets and offer feedback. I offer virtual office hours, as you can see on the agenda. There's a lot of information on this agenda, but I do want to unpack it with you today. The last item on the agenda is my virtual office hours for the last meeting. But then also, we will be discussing the draft text of each amendment and each update during the Planning Commission meeting. So don't feel obligated. We can also discuss it, as we will, and we are discussing the findings today. So I would like to review a little bit more of this agenda. I'll go through each item as we discussed in the steering committee and synthesize the findings that we have found so far, but also we'll ask for your feedback on any first rounds of thoughts. And then I want to show you the right margin. We have our upcoming meeting dates, so this is the calendar and expectations of all of our steering committee meetings, and then when we expect to have a draft text to Planning Commission, which is December 1st. And then we have in the bottom right-hand corner, homework. And you received the homework today. I'll discuss it at the last point of this packet. But it's to start our corridor conversation, which will be the topic of conversation in August. So, let me make sure I got through all of that. Sorry? Oh, what?
You said to discuss in August?
We are.
Yeah, at the
Us?
August steering committee meeting,
Oh, August steering, sorry.
August 23rd, on the top right margin. Okay. Just want to make sure I covered all my notes. Good. So we already are familiar with Progress 3. We announced that at the last meeting, so I'll move past that. But the residential districts and dimensional standards, as you can see in item number 2 on the agenda, let's take a step-by-step look at all these agenda items and then offer the synthesis of what we discussed as a steering committee, and I'll also ask for your preliminary thoughts. So, item 1, we discussed intent statements with the steering committee, and the steering committee was good with the intent statements, as you can see in page 2 and page 3. We do have one modification to say 1 family to 2 family dwellings allowed in the low-density residential districts. But I'm not sure if we covered this with you guys yet, but the intent, our first goal with consolidating the residential district or improving the residential districts in East Point is to create 2 zoning districts. Did we cover this yet? Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so we did consolidate different zoning districts that are existing today into 2 districts. This is offered from best practices from the Michigan Association of Planning and the MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, just to create more simpler zoning districts. So we used, so we created 1 district for low-density residential, and that's us consolidating our existing R1 and R2 districts. And then in our other category, we created our missing middle residential district, which consolidated the R2, the RM1, and RM2 districts. Okay, so then, since we created these new districts, we needed new intent statements, and we offered a more simple, easy-to-read intent statements listed here. Does the commission have any feedback on the intent statements?
Any commissioners have any thoughts or comments? Commissioners need time to review the comment or to review the statement.
Chair, just so you know, the steering committee authorized approval of the intent statements. But we just want your feedback as well.
Thanks. Okay. I mean, you caught the one thing that I would have said is that you need to drop the 4 to 2 family dwellings in the low-density residential district. I'm personally not a fan of this missing middle residential district title, to be honest with you. I'd rather you call it moderate density residential district or something else. I think missing middle is a term of the month in our planner speak that nobody really understands or gives a damn about. So I would rather it have some sort of other terminology. I also don't like the language that's used here because it seems like you're skipping densities. You go from low to moderately high to intermediate to moderately high. What is there a difference between moderately low and intermediate? What's the difference? Is intermediate the next step up in density?
Is this an open-ended question, or do you want to have a conversation?
Well, you can respond however you feel appropriate.
Okay, well, we can come back to the steering committee and discuss the name of the category. I didn't receive any negative feedback so far, so we can see what they say. But is everyone familiar with what missing middle means? Because that's a great point. Maybe some people don't know what missing middle is.
I'm sure a lot of people don't know what missing middle means.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Okay, so right now, as we know it, residential land uses have a stark dichotomy. There's either single-family detached residential houses or apartments. So missing middle is literally the middle types of housing units in between the single family and the apartments. And this allows for differences in housing units, so like different family sizes to achieve a housing unit of their choice. And then since there's difference in size to accommodate different size of households, there's also difference in income and affordability. So that's why missing middle is a topic of conversation. And I wouldn't say it's a hot topic, like it's gonna pass. This is a current topic, and I think it needs to continue in our rhetoric forever. Because right now, we do recognize that there's a stark dichotomy between housing, and we do need to accommodate for the housing affordability in different family sizes. But I do see that we can improve the name of the category.
If I may ask a question, Chairman?
Please.
Being a part of the steering committee and also being a developer, I would say that the terminology, it seems a little bit awkward, missing middle program, but that is the term that MISTA is using. And MISTA has also designated funding specifically for that title of housing. So MEDC and MISTA are together trying to inspire more developers. It's usually units no more than 16 in a building structure. It's not the density, but your triplex quads, mainly up to 8 units. And so since it's been designated, there's quite a bit of resources that are coming to support it. So it's a terminology that's coming from MISTA and MEDC.
That's very true. That's an excellent point. I think that you're overly inclusive in the missing middle category as well. I think to Commissioner Naylor's point, the difference between a 14 unit per net residential acre to 21 unit per net residential acre is a significant jump. And if you're including RM1 and RM2 into the missing middle housing, I think you're you're creating essentially an overly broad category of housing typologies. I think Commissioner Naylor's point is exactly right in that what should be the missing middle are triplexes, quads, small detached or clustered duplexes up to 8 units, and really that's about it. And I don't think that you would typically get to 21 units per net residential acre in those types of developments. So I would rather see 3 categories of zoning, of residential zoning. And I'm fine if you want to have a moderate density. I think that's fine. We need to have a diversity of densities in the city. But especially throwing RM2 into that category, I think is a mistake. I think you're getting way too dense.
Okay. Thanks for your feedback. This is why we're having these conversations now, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Do any other commissioners have any comments or questions?
Okay, if I can, move on to the residential dimensional standards. So staff's currently figuring out a current analysis of the existing lot sizes and lot widths in the city. And we don't have formal numbers to present to you today, but I can discuss a couple numbers that the committee threw out there to consider. So everything's still in draft form, but I do want to make sure that we get some sort of feedback from you guys again today while we continue this topic. So talking about, first of all, the low-density residential schedule of regulations. We're still waiting on analysis of lot size, but does anyone have any opinions so far on what lot size should be or lot width? I know that the steering committee previously discussed 50 feet for a minimum lot width for low density and 3 stories, but this is all draft.
Do commissioners generally think a 50-foot width is sufficient for the R1 district or the low-density district? Should it be smaller? Should it be larger? Should we become Shelby Township? No offense to Shelby Township, by the way. Maybe a little bit, but that's okay. I'll take that one. You may.
Demolished, and now they're basically unusable.
Right, they're unbuildable.
Correct.
Commissioners, thoughts on that?
Ryan, did you say stories 3? Or
Yes.
t- or-
That's what we discussed.
So moving it up to 3 stories from the 2?
Yes.
Thanks.
So again, I'm around if you have any questions, and I will also send virtual office hours. We can continue this conversation.
I do have one, I have one seemingly trivial point, but it's not trivial to me because I live with it every day. I will tell you this right now. I cannot stand it when you have multifamily or multi-dwelling unit districts that express minimum lot size as if both units can't or don't necessarily have to be on the same parcel. So, as an example, in the R2 district, our current minimum lot size is 3,500 square feet, which would essentially allow one structure that would cover 2 parcels. And I can tell you right now, it is a nightmare administratively to deal with half of an owner that owns half of one structure, one shared structure, because they have basically property rights and parcel rights over that parcel, and trying to get them to act to keep up their property, maintain their property, rebuild their property is a nightmare. I don't think we should allow that as a city. Administratively, it is a lot easier if all units are on one parcel. I'm just telling you right now, I've dealt with it 100 times, and I have seen structures where one half of it is literally burnt to the ground and someone is living in the other half, and trying to get the other property owner to do something is an absolute nightmare. And I've literally had to shear off people's houses in order to save them from somebody who has been derelict in their property maintenance and upkeep. And it is hard, and it's really expensive. So the minimum lot area should be 7,000 square feet, at least.
Yeah, that's something in our notes that
Yeah.
we'll address. Thanks.
Yeah.
So based off the feedback from this conversation, we might look into considering another additional residential district. But Table 2 suggests missing middle, so more moderate housing schedule of regulations. And the steering committee, again, just talked about this. They have some preliminary numbers out there. So we preliminarily discussed that 1,600 square feet should be a lot size per dwelling unit, and then 6 stories for maximum height per structure. And then there will be a footnote on the 6th story that says that the 6th story needs to be recessed or have a step back. And then the minimum floor area per dwelling unit we discussed would be 800. Again, this is all our first round of conversations, so if you want to offer any feedback and help us navigate it, that'd be great.
6 stories?
Yes, that's what we discussed.
Are we putting apartment complexes up? Like the senior living center? Is that what this is intended for?
There's some options for that. Were you able to look at the different missing middle housing typologies from
Sadly, I don't have my glasses right.
AARP website?
It all looks like small writing.
Well, there's, quadplexes or townhomes. I mean, townhomes would probably just 2 stories. But, yeah, it allows for multiplexes. This district would allow for multiplexes, which could have up to, doesn't have to be, 5 stories with a 6-story setback. Or a recessed 6-story. And that's to protect the air and sun rights of adjacent property owners.
Well, if we get to 5 stories, I doubt that anybody's above 5 stories in the city right now, except for the senior housing complexes.
I know this conversation came from our steering committee, and we have some developers on the steering committee who took in consideration how much allowable heights they would need to see in a city ordinance to be influenced to make a decision to construct homes here. So these numbers aren't arbitrary. It's based off our steering committee conversation, but again, we're looking for your feedback.
And if I can add, Chair, we wanted to talk about being enticing for developers wanting to come. We want to have more density, community, family, and with cost of construction, the extra units just helps move toward economy of scale. And it gives East Point an opportunity, as we see on the board out in the lobby, opportunity to get a fresh look, a facelift, and some of our new development for building density to be enticing to developers at the extra height. Also, as residents, one of the things we know a lot of residents are looking for, they like the 4th and 5th level to be on the top or some kind of rooftop amenity. So we wanted to have some opportunities, not that it has to be maximized, but it does give an invitation for developers that we want to entice to come to help build out our community and build some more density.
And again, perhaps the standard could be relocated in our new zoning district that allows for higher density. I mean, that's always, we can come back to the steering committee and offer that because this is an ongoing conversation and we're working together to improve it. So thanks for your feedback.
Commissioners, have any other comments on the schedule regulations and dimensional standards? Is there anything else the planner would like to add?
So then, the other items on the agenda for the steering committee was to discuss the residential uses and the missing middle housing uses. So you received as a insert to your packet today, the draft text of the different uses allowed in the residential districts. And we have them organized by residential uses. And in the columns, you can see low density, missing middle, and then the third column are standards. So the standards column means that these types of, elements or uses need to have additional design standards. So you can see the list of accessory uses, dwelling units, group homes, and public and quasi-public uses that we assessed with the steering committee one by one if we want to see them as permitted or special land uses. Is there anything preliminarily that jumps out at you that you'd like to discuss? I think this portion of the conversation, the steering committee was majorly around the accessory dwelling unit conversation. You can see under dwelling units, the first row, the steering committee discussed allowing these by right.
I'm sorry, where am I supposed to be looking? Oh, down here on dwelling units at the side. Never mind, I see it.
On page 6
Yeah.
of the insert. So you can see in the low density category, the types of dwelling units that the steering committee discussed to allow as permitted uses are accessory dwelling units and duplexes. Well, and single-family homes.
This is probably just my ignorance. Do we have a definition of a cottage home in our ordinance currently?
This is something that we would have to add.
Okay. So what definition did you give the steering committee of what a cottage home is?
Well, we gave pictures, actually.
That's probably better.
Yeah.
What picture did you give them?
It was a courtyard setup, so smaller homes that were like in a quad setup, but one story, smaller homes in a quad setup with a courtyard in the middle. Cottage homes are similar to courtyard homes.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that. My next question is, what picture did you give them for a courtyard home then?
The courtyard home that, Laura, do you want to say something?
Just that typically, like, cottage homes are like 6 or 7 to 8 units on one single parcel that are anchored like around a central green open space. And they're usually like 800 square feet each. Sometimes they may not have they may have like a garage building or a shared carport, as opposed to each having their own garage area and are accessed like from the perimeter of the property, so that all the front porches face inwards towards that green space, and it's more of a communal gathering space. There's not too many in Michigan. I think there's a good example somewhere in Berkeley. But it's one of AARP's recommended housing typologies.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a series of examples on their website.
And that's what you provided to the steering committee?
Yes.
Yeah, in your packet, you'll see worksheet. Worksheet 3 has a link to the photo gallery, and we put this up on the screen and discussed it.
Yeah, there are nice pictures.
Next
at the
time
link.
we have pictures, we'll put it up on the next meeting.
The link is in there. Sheet three.
Do any commissioners have any other questions or comments on the? Or whatever, the supplemental handout?
Okay, and then we discussed next remapping residential districts. So again, in the packet, you received the steering committee packet. So your planning commission packet, you received all of the worksheets from the steering committee. And then today, you received more of a analysis. So you received the draft text of the residential zoning ordinance. And then we also received the synthesis of what happened at our steering committee meeting in progress from before. So within your packet, worksheet 4 in, agenda item, I think 4, discuss remapping residential areas. We briefly talked about where we would like to see more density in East Point. I thought this is a good opportunity for us to also discuss preliminary today. From the conversation, we discussed creating opportunities for more missing middle housing or moderate density or higher density along a major corridor or major collector roads. We identify these as Stevens, Baconsfield, and Topher. And then also at institutional sites, and within planned mixed-use districts. So planned mixed-use districts are definitely the 9 Mile corridor in the downtown district. An example of an institutional site would be a site where you can see on the map that is a school or a church. We suggest adding or rezoning these areas to allow for housing and more density in housing. But that doesn't mean that these schools or churches won't be allowed to continue their use. It just means that if the community decides, or if a property owner decides that they could build housing on that property, as opposed to just using it as a school. And I do know that in the northwest corner of East Point, Kim, what's the name of the church that's for sale? St. Barnabas. We discussed St. Barnabas is for sale, so we discussed rezoning that area to allow for more of these missing middle housing typologies. Do you have any thoughts of where you'd like to see more density?
Did you talk about rezoning residential areas that are currently R1, but immediately adjacent to the corridors?
Yes.
And how did that conversation go?
The conversation went that it's the steering committee supports rezoning institutional sites like St. Barnabas, and then sites that are R1 along collector roads, which we identify as Stevens,
Okay.
Beaconsfield.
So not adjacent to, but along, they have to be along the collector roads.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Naylor, what do you think about that?
I think it will give us more density along our corridors and also bring more attention to the community. When we see those projects going on, I think we can get a lot more residents, I think, if we can see that happening here.
Do you believe that there's space limitations from a real estate perspective on some of these corridors?
Well, if we're looking at the minimum lot size, we're complying with that. I think we can zone it accordingly. Like you said, there's some of those institutional spaces. There's more areas. I know they're doing that in other cities. So I think it's a good model to follow. It will all turn down to what type of housing is selected for those lots. So it doesn't look like it's over congested, but it's just going to be based on the typology used.
Any other commissioners have any comments? Questions? Moving on.
Okay. And so next, in the steering committee's packet, we discussed the proposed table of contents organization, because we're just taking strides to make the zoning ordinance for East Point more user-friendly. So you can see within the packet, your planning commissioner's packet, the proposed table of contents. And the main changes are having all of the pertinent information at the beginning and not making developers or interested parties scan through the entire ordinance. So they can see immediately what uses are allowed in the residential districts, the mixed-use districts, the light industrial, what schedule of regulations there are, and then towards the end, you'll get into more of the design standards, how the processes occur, and then at the end, the glossary.
Will this also include pictures and photos so that they can not only read a description, but see what it is that's being described?
Yes, right? We can't include them as needed.
Well, typically, the zoning ordinance doesn't contain photos, like, per se. Sometimes there's like a graphic representation of how many stories, more of an abstract, to give like, to paint a picture of what's desired. That's certainly something I think that we would want to include. But just a photo of, like, a building from a different community or something, typically we wouldn't include that.
Is there some place where there would be some reference for them to go and look? Because, and the reason that I ask is because even tonight, I reviewed the material before tonight's meeting, then we're talking about it tonight. You gave a description of cottage houses, for example. But then when I go through and look at the link on ARP's website, it's like a whole different conglomerate of something totally different than what I was imagining as you were talking. So for your everyday person who's looking at the zoning ordinance, even if there were some type of link for them to go and connect the dots, I guess, is what I'm thinking. So I understand that an ordinance in and of itself is usually just written material, written descriptions, but it would be good, since we're talking, about different typologies and language that your everyday person is not going to be using, it would be helpful for the residents if we really want them to engage. And if we're going to take the time to reset the table of contents to make it more accessible, then it would also be helpful maybe if they at least had a link they could go to see in picture form what's being described. Just a thought.
I completely agree with Commissioner Muniz. Hopefully I pronounced it. I think that there is so much legalese, and unless you're a property developer or an attorney or a planner, you're lost in the weeds. So quite frankly, I think that being lost in the weeds is a good way of getting stung by a snake. Witness the ladies when I had mentioned at last meeting about doing something to make it look nicer. I wasn't talking about pots of flowers. I was talking about art, trees, something like that, but they didn't know. So this is a prime example. You tell somebody who wants to come in and put something up, you've got all this stuff. We have to make it understandable for people. And I would say that it needs to be on a state level as well as a federal level. We need to make this type of zoning information understandable for the person that doesn't come with a PhD.
I completely agree. And I will try to add in as many visual aids as possible. I know my colleague was just discussing prototype sheets.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. Like, it's very helpful to convey to the public and developers, like, with photographs of the built environment. So having, like, kind of like fact sheets or prototype sheets as examples that the city could update, like, regularly, as opposed to having it be part of the adopted code to help communicate to the public. Like, that would be a more flexible tool, probably.
Absolutely. And I've said this, I think I've said it to somebody up here, I'm sure. It's like people that come in and buy a business, and then suddenly there's a change in ownership, and they happen to be on an alleyway, and next thing you know, we're coming at them with the need of a $60,000 masonry wall. You know, there's certain things that people should be able to know before they go into a business, or if they're going to apply for an occupancy. I'm sure there are many ways to skin this cat. Forgive me for saying that, Louis. But I just feel like sometimes, we want to be business friendly, but I don't think that we are doing our due diligence. Now, is that on the part of the person who's selling the building? I don't know. But it seems to me that we should find a way to get to these people and just help them in whatever way they can, so they don't stumble into the need for a $60,000 masonry wall or trash receptacles and things like that that should have been put in place years ago, or screening materials. It's just, we want to be business friendly, we need to make it understandable for people. Sorry for my soapbox. I've been quiet tonight, after all.
Yeah.
Personally, I think if you're opening a business, you would do your research and your homework and not have those surprises.
But you look at the number of little boutiques that have popped up, and chances are a lot of these folks are running on credit cards, or maybe they don't have the type of business plan, and they buy a building, and next thing you know, they're before Kim or Mara, and all of a sudden we're telling them, you got to put a dumpster enclosure in, you got to put a masonry wall in, you got to do this, you got to do that. Next thing you know, somebody who might not be highly capitalized to do a business is looking at an insurmountable amount of money that they need.
Right, but if they would have did their research and their homework prior to opening up a business, which I would think a business plan is something you would put together ahead of time.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people, and I see
I don't
this in
think
my
it's
business.
unique to East Point. I think it's the fact it's just old laws not catching up to the current climate of the entrepreneurial movement. Because businesses were established back in the day by certain communities, certain families, certain statuses. And this is unprecedented time that we see this level of entrepreneurship developing. The small business has taken a new spin, and our laws just have not caught up. So many of these established laws, because it was the same people doing business. And now we have a whole new influx of this entrepreneur, all ages, coming in to do business, and we just haven't caught up with our laws and legislation. So East Point can be part of that redesign, but it's not subjected, it's not just here in our city. And it's not that we're being, or not trying to be business friendly. We have not addressed all the things that may be necessary for new businesses that are emerging, with light of how business was done once before and how it's being done today. And I know there was a 3-day conference before elected officials. It's not just in our cities. From a governmental standpoint, there's a lot of legislation that is just on the books, and you find out after you're in business, but yet you're saying you need to go into business, and we're not covering those areas.
Sorry, you know what, I forgot to ask Commissioner Lalonde if there's anything he would like to say, as he's also on the steering committee, correct? You were also on the steering committee, right, sir? You're good?
Yep.
Okay, great. Moving on.
Okay. The last item that we discussed very rapidly because it was closing time, is the memorandum that AEW did, or city engineer, on parking. They did a parking study in the DDA on Thursday, May 26th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I say that because we have to take that in consideration. It was one day on Thursday from 11 to 2, okay? But their findings show that a single parking space, this is the second sentence of the first paragraph, a single parking space may be utilized by 2 or more individual land uses without any conflict, based on the hour, day, and season. This, to me, means that there's an excess in parking in the DDA, and the districts that are studied are on page 2. So we've got District A, B, C, and D. And then pairing that knowledge with what the different districts are, I find Table 5 the most relevant in this conversation because it talks about the supply and demand of parking. So you can see, I'm sorry, I've been saying districts, I guess they call them zones. So in Zone D, for example, the supply meets the demand of parking. There's 371 parking spaces, or I'm sorry, there's 374 parking spaces, and then AEW found that there's 371 users for those parking spaces. So 371 of those spaces were occupied. So you can see that there's a good balance there. And as we look through zones A, B, and C, we want to see more of the ratio of a 1-to-1 ratio where supply meets demand. And you can see in zone A, the spots available are 453, but there's only a demand for 256. So you see that there's an overabundance of spots or of spaces or of supply. And now what we can do with this information is restrict supply in these areas or increase demand. And the way we do that is by encouraging more businesses to open or building more density, but not requiring more parking.
Do any commissioners have any questions regarding the AEW report? Is there anything else the planner would like to address?
Yeah, the last item is the homework, and we'd love for you guys to participate. Again, we're starting our conversations on mixed-use districts in August at the August Steering Committee. So you received what is it? What did they say? A clipboard. Okay, you received a clipboard to go out and experience a commercial corridor. Were they assigned corridors? Yeah. Okay, so you were assigned a corridor to go out and experience it. And what we're asking for you to do is engage in exercise 1 and 2 of your homework. Exercise 1 involves just recording what you see out in the field. And we use best practices from Kevin Lynch. Kevin Lynch is an urbanist known for mentally mapping an image of the city in order to engage in, well, in order to express what's happening in the city without actually having to be there. So you guys are the eyes and ears of your assigned corridors, and then you can bring that knowledge to help everyone else understand what's actually going there that don't have the means or availability to go and experience it themselves. So it's all about creating or sharing knowledge and being inclusive, I guess, of how we view our city. So Kevin Lynch's 5 elements to describe a city are that there's a path, which is a street or walkway, sidewalk, transit. There's an edge, and the way I see an edge is that it's a contrasting use. So what would that be? Like obviously a corridor like 94, a highway, and then right across the street, a mixed-use business district. That is a hard edge. A hard edge is a freeway. But then there can be major or minor edges as well. So we could say that maybe a school and another like shopping district might have a minor edge because the school is a little bit calmer than the shopping district. Districts are distinct areas, like spatial areas, that have similar characteristics. Nodes are concentrated areas that have more traffic or are more popular. These can be intersections, obviously, but then also, people waiting in line out a door at East Detroit Bakery. That could be a minor node. And then landmarks are points that you use to reference your city. So City Hall is a great landmark. So we're asking the steering committee and hopefully you guys to participate in this exercise of understanding what our commercial corridors are and using Kevin Lynch's best practices and how to understand them. We've got examples of how we determine all of these elements spatially on pages 2 and 3. And then moving forward, exercise 2, if you want to opt out of 1 and into 2, or you want to do both, all of your thoughts are appreciated. But exercise 2 involves just writing down what you want to fix, keep, and aspire in your corridor. And we have an optional word bank to get your mind flowing about urban planning concepts and what we're discussing as we look through the zoning ordinance.
Any questions for the homework, regarding the homework? Is there anything else the planner would like to address?
That's it, thanks.
Okay, we move on to the second hearing of the public. If you'd like to participate in the second hearing of the public, please request to be heard and wait to be called. When called, please approach the podium, state your name, write your name on the ledger, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Chairman Lubeck, would you like to speak? Please do.
I got my notes, and I'm gonna try to go from memory. Discussing residential and lot size. Back during the housing boom, there were a lot of double wide lots, or 80-foot lots. And people came wanting to subdivide and build them. And it was decided as long as the majority of that neighborhood was on 40-foot lots, there was no problem. Had one gentleman, he had 120 feet of lot space, and he wanted to subdivide it, put 3 houses on it. Problem was, the majority of that neighborhood, all the houses were built on 60-foot lots. The zoning board of appeals turned him down, he took it to court, and the city prevailed. The second thought I had, when I heard 6-story buildings, and you consulted the fire department, they are getting a new piece of equipment, multi-million-dollar piece of equipment that they're gonna have to live with for 20 or 25 years. Everyone in East Point panics when they say 100-foot ladder truck. It's not for how high it can go, but for how far it can reach. So when we were talking 6-story buildings and bigger setbacks and that's what triggered in my mind. Is our fire department going to be able to service that if they need it? Thank you.
Seeing as how we have no other public, we will move on. We have no training, so we will move on to comments. Please.
Prior to the discussion we just had about the zoning, I believe we approved, we made a motion to send the future land use map to the city council.
To recommend, yeah.
But given the conversation about potentially changing and having a 3rd district type in the residential, should we wait to submit that future land use map until that is perhaps changed? Instead of the middle market now, perhaps we will have two different types of zoning. And so on that future land use map that we recommended to city council to review, it has middle market. But now we're talking about potentially having a difference there. So is that something we need to retract until that is accurate? Because right now, that's in flux.
Does the planner have a thought on that question?
The future land use map, as you've recommended to council to authorize distribution, has flexibility in it. So just because it doesn't have 2 zoning districts or 2 or 3 specific zoning districts for residential is okay. I don't think you need to change anything on the future land use map at this time.
So a question, if we do come up with 2 different zones for the middle market, would we change it in the future?
No, it could stay that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Homan, do you have any comments? Fire Marshal? Mr. Albright? Ms. Brakashevsky?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Ms. Ha?
No, thank you.
Councilmember DeMonico?
I'll follow suit, nothing.
Excellent. Our newest member, Commissioner Munoz. Do you have any comments? Commissioner Lalonde?
No comments.
Commissioner Naylor?
I would just like to say that we did have the fire marshals as a part of our steering committee, so he can keep us in compliance, so residents can feel secure that we are looking at all aspects. And other than that, I have no comments.
Commissioner Broll,
No comments tonight.
Secretary Yelinski,
Nothing, thank you.
Vice Chair DeHaan.
Congratulations to Councilwoman Lucido for taking her next step. I wish her well in the general election. Congratulations to County Commissioner Kleinfeld. Wish her well in her next step to the general election as well. I respect anybody that raises their hand and runs for an office. Whether I agree with them or not is irrelevant. I respect anybody who raises their hand. There are plenty of people I don't agree with. Commissioner Kleinfeld was one of them, but she and I have come to a place where I can appreciate her now more than I did before. So that's what's called meeting in the middle, something that this country doesn't seem to do anymore. I came down Gratiot today from 8 Mile, and I was inundated by car repair facilities that have cars everywhere. Quite frankly, it looks like a rolling junkyard. I passed the car lot that was behind Ray's Boom Boom Room. That again looks like a junkyard. And I'm sure that there was some sort of approval for these things, whatever, but visually, coming into the city from the south side, it's horrible. And I would certainly love to see somebody clean that up, because it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. And I look at that junkyard behind Ray's Boom Boom Room, and I wonder how many of those cars are leaking things into the ground. So I hope somebody can take a look at that.
Is the commissioner prepared to make a motion to adjourn at 8:27 PM?
I make that motion.
Do we have support? We have motion by Vice Chair DeHaan, support from Commissioner Naylor. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHaan,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor, Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Ms. Muniz,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman Palazzolo.
Yes.